Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Jennette McCurdy? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of Jennette McCurdy, then move to my analysis. Jennette McCurdy was born in Los Angeles, California on June 26, 1992. She was raised by Deborah and Mark McCurdy and had 3 older brothers. The family lived in a rented house in Grove, which is about 35 miles southeast of Los Angeles. Years later, when Jennette was an adult, she learned that Mark was not her biological father. When Jennette was 2 years old, her mother Deborah was diagnosed with breast cancer, which led to fear and tension in the household for years. Jennette described her family as Mormon, saying that she was baptized as a Mormon when she was 8. Around the same time, Jennette would first appear on television. During her early acting years, she appeared on a number of TV shows, including Mad TV, Will and Grace, Malcolm in the Middle, Judging Amy, Zoe 101, and Close to Home. In 2003, she appeared in the movie Hollywood Homicide. Jennette is best known for starring in the TV series iCarly from 2007 to 2012. This show ran on Nickelodeon. During her time on the show, she was under pressure not to gain weight. In June of 2013, Jennette started working on a new television series on Nickelodeon. She starred alongside Ariana Grande in the series Sam and Cat. Just like iCarly, on Sam and Cat, Jennette was not allowed to gain a gram of fat. The show was canceled after 1 season. In September of 2013, Jennette's mother Deborah died from breast cancer. By this point, Jennette was struggling with her intake of alcohol and food, as in too much alcohol and too little food, as well as having obsessive-compulsive symptoms. Jennette believed the symptoms were caused by the stress of her work as a child actress and mistreatment suffered at the hands of her mother. Jennette starred in the Netflix series Between in 2015. It ran for 2 seasons before being canceled. Jennette retired from acting in 2017 to pursue writing and directing. She focused her attention on receiving psychotherapy and reduced her activity on social media. In August of 2022, Jennette published a book titled I'm Glad My Mom Died. The book has achieved incredible financial success. Now moving to my analysis. The main focus of Jennette's book is her relationship with her mother. The book's many short chapters are divided into 2 sections based on her mother's death, before and after. There are both positive and negative elements featured in the narrative, but the latter elements are emphasized. I think it's important to note that only one side of the story is available, namely Jennette's. Her mother is not around to defend herself. I don't think that Jennette had much of a reason to be deceptive, but her perception and memory may not be completely accurate. One would expect her perception to be somewhat distorted based on the horrible experiences she recounts in the book. With that in mind, here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me when looking at Jennette's story as featured in her book and in other sources like interviews. Item number 1, Jennette's mother Deborah pushed her into acting at a young age. At first, Jennette thought this was wonderful. She was going to have this amazing secret relationship with her mother. They were going to be best friends. Jennette felt as though her mother's behavior was indicative of love. It proved that Deborah valued Jennette and would do everything possible to meet all of her needs. Deborah lived for Jennette, and Jennette lived for her. They were a team fighting for a common goal. Even as acting became challenging, Jennette maintained a positive view of her mother. Item number 2, toward the end of her book, Jennette listed all of the offenses that her mother committed. This was after developing some insight as to what actually happened with her mother. Here's what Jennette said about her mother's behavior. Acting was Deborah's dream for Jennette, not Jennette's dream for herself. Deborah was overly critical of Jennette, pointing out every little flaw in her appearance and behavior, ostensibly to advance her acting career. Deborah significantly contributed to Jennette's dysregulation of food intake, which started when Jennette was 11. Jennette's mother taught her how to restrict calories and weighed her every week. Her mother lied to Jennette's physician when he pointed out that Jennette's weight was too low, like Deborah pretended she had no idea what happened. Jennette said that her mother was a narcissist who denied any problems and had no interest in changing. Deborah examined Jennette's private areas during showers until she was 17, under the guise that she was checking for cancer. Based on Deborah's history, this may have actually been the reason, but it's a major violation of boundaries either way, and one of the most shocking revelations in the book. Item number 3, Jennette believed that her mother had obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. The symptoms were first evident through Deborah's hoarding behavior. Deborah became emotionally connected to ordinary, inanimate objects. She was not able to throw anything away. Every item had a story constructed around it, a special significance that she was not willing to lose. Deborah's OCD symptoms are consistent with her cancer diagnosis. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and knew that a recurrence of cancer was likely. Deborah lived with the sword of Damocles dangling above her head. OCD is often conceptualized as a disorder rooted in fear. The ritualistic behavior offers a sense of security, a way to control one's environment, to change that which normally cannot be changed. Something else that occurs to me is that Deborah was trying to hold on to what she had, like memories of better times. She did not want to give up anything which could activate nostalgia. As I mentioned, Jennette felt as though she herself had obsessive-compulsive disorder in addition to her mother. This brings me to item number 4. Jennette's symptoms of OCD were expressed differently than her mother's. Instead of hoarding, they were expressed around religious beliefs. Jennette believed that she was receiving messages from the Holy Spirit. She believed the Holy Spirit was telling her to perform various rituals for a certain number of times, like touching objects, unlocking and relocking doors, or spinning around. When she would successfully perform these rituals, she would experience some type of positive result, like booking an acting job. She connected her obedience with success. As long as she followed the rules, as long as she stayed with the program, everything would work out. Jennette was selected for many of her roles specifically because she was able to take direction. She was victorious over other actresses because they could not follow instructions. In essence, this means that Jennette's career, which was a major part of her life, was dependent on obedience. Item number 5. Jennette's mother died just 3 months after Jennette started working on the TV show Sam and Cat. At first, Jennette did not consider her mother's behavior as mistreatment. While Jennette was receiving counseling, her therapist suggested that Deborah was harmful. Jennette walked out of therapy determined she was never going to see a psychotherapist again. The idea of thinking about her mother negatively meant she would have to reconsider her own experiences, values, and accomplishments. It was more than just the idea that her mother did something bad. It was hard to accept because Jennette would have to look at herself differently. I think this highlights an important point in mother-daughter dynamics when the mother is narcissistic. The mother and daughter become enmeshed. In a sense, they share the same fate. If the mother is made to look like a terrible person, then the daughter is going to feel like a terrible person as well. Jennette eventually went back to therapy, and over time, began to appreciate the negative aspects of her mother's behavior. Moving to item number 6. Deborah was not able or willing to maintain boundaries. Jennette mentioned a few times in her book how her mother would repeat her story of cancer to everybody. She used it to gain access and privileges at the studios where Jennette was acting. Deborah was highly driven and did not care about how people perceived her or any consequences. She didn't care about jeopardizing Jennette's health. She didn't care about boundaries. Deborah needed Jennette to be successful at any cost. She was over-involved in every detail of Jennette's life, especially as it related to acting. For example, Jennette was able to think of sad stories so she could cry on cue when recording TV shows. This was considered a valuable skill for an actress. Her mother would help her come up with additional stories to think about when the stories Jennette was using became ineffective, like when they no longer caused her to cry. Over time, she would just get desensitized to these stories. This represents an oddly accurate metaphor. Deborah found new ways to make her daughter cry. Item number 7. Deborah may have been living vicariously through her daughter. In one sense, Jennette represented a life that Deborah was unable to live. Jennette was young, successful, popular, earned a lot of money, and not facing an impending health crisis. Deborah wanted credit for Jennette's success. It was her greatest achievement in life. For example, Deborah asked Jennette to sing the Bette Midler song, "Wind Beneath My Wings," at her funeral, which Jennette did not end up doing. Even after her death, Deborah wanted to be a major part of Jennette's life. She made her promise to visit her grave every day, something else that Jennette would not end up doing. Deborah did not want the relationship to end with her death. Rather, she desired to be an imposing and undying force in Jennette's life. Item number 8. Jennette's mother wasn't the only person who was criticized in the book. A producer at Nickelodeon named Dan Schneider was also a target of Jennette. She referred to him as the creator in the book, but it's clear who she was talking about. Jennette implied that Dan would verbally mistreat young actors and was inappropriate with her. For example, he allegedly rubbed her shoulders. His critical behavior created a dynamic which led to Jennette going out of her way to earn his praise. Jennette said that Nickelodeon offered her $300,000 not to tell her story about her experiences with Dan Schneider. Item number 9. Jennette's abandonment of her acting career has a parallel to her rejection of the way her mother treated her and her mother's goals. Deborah wanted Jennette to be an actress. It's not something Jennette wanted. It seems as though giving up on acting was important for Jennette's recovery, like she needed to leave everything her mother touched behind her and move on to a world separate of her mother's influence. Maladaptive family relationships, including mother-daughter relationships, do not end with the death of one of the parties. The surviving party carries on the destructive dynamics unless they gain insight. Fortunately for Jennette, she did the hard work of mental health counseling and was able to establish her individual identity. Item number 10. As I mentioned, Jennette referred to her mother as narcissistic. Is this true based on Jennette's account of the story? Is her mother really narcissistic? I think that it is probably true, again, based on what Jennette's saying. The relationship between a daughter and narcissistic mother has a number of elements that we see in the narrative. A few examples. Deborah was in charge. She completely dominated Jennette. Her mother did not leave her any choices and routinely violated boundaries, sometimes in very serious ways. Deborah promoted the idea that Jennette's acting career would bring them closer, yet clearly it served other purposes for Deborah, including financial and existential. Jennette's feelings and desires were repeatedly invalidated. Deborah criticized every aspect of Jennette's behavior and appearance, including her weight. The scale became not just a measurement of weight, but a measurement of Jennette's worth to her mother. One could argue that Deborah was trying to keep Jennette looking like a child in order to maintain a mother and young daughter dynamic. Deborah did not want Jennette to grow up and develop independence. She did not want the dynamic to change. Deborah had Jennette exactly where she wanted her. Now moving to my final thoughts. Jennette's experiences highlight the concern that Hollywood studios will become enthusiastic conspirators with narcissistic mothers. A mother that refuses to protect her daughter brings joy to the hearts of studio executives. A mother that will promote the studio's values regardless of the damage done to her daughter is exactly what the studios are looking for. It is the greatest prize of all. Some people have criticized the harshness of Jennette's narrative, like the whole idea that she is glad her mother is dead. Here are my thoughts on this. First, this was just a catchy title. I'm not convinced that Jennette is literally glad her mother is dead, rather simply grateful to have escaped her. I think the irony in this case is that Deborah's terminal illness led to her living vicariously through her daughter, and it ultimately freed Jennette from oppression by causing Deborah's death. One could argue that the illness was both the cause and the solution to a terrible problem for Jennette. Second, regardless of her mother's tragic ending, if Jennette's story is accurate, she had a right to be angry. She was a victim of a manipulative offender. Even still, I wonder if Jennette is still in an early stage of healing and will later realize that her mother's death was not the only occurrence that could have set her free. Setting boundaries could have accomplished the same goal for Jennette. Obviously, no one had a choice in this case, but in general, daughters do not have to wait for narcissistic mothers to die to escape the destructive dynamic. Considering the normal childhood that Jennette was denied and all of her negative experiences, she has done a terrific job in her recovery. She realized not only the importance of therapy, but of being willing to challenge her mother's values. Too many daughters remain captive in destructive dynamics because they are never willing to ask themselves, what if my mother was wrong? This is one question of which a narcissistic mother would never approve. Those are my thoughts in the case of Jennette McCurdy. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comments section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.